How's it going, everyone? My name is Greg Skiba. I'm running this channel, Mortgage Basics, and this week I wanted to talk about rental income and how this can actually dramatically increase your purchase price, meaning the price that you're looking for in the market, and how it can actually decrease what you're paying each month. And let's dive into the numbers and see how everything gets affected when you add a tenant and jump into a rental. So most buyers think that it's just their income that's going to determine what they can afford, and it's not entirely true. For the most part, that's what we're basing the majority of this on. But sometimes the property itself can actually change the math as well. And what I mean by that is, yes, we have your rental or your employment income, but if you are purchasing a property that has some sort of rental potential in it, so whether it's a basement suite or it's got an ADU, like an accessory dwelling unit, like a garden, a laneway house, a garden house, whatever we're calling it these days, um, that extra income can be used on your application in many instances, and it can sway the numbers in a way that it lets you look into a higher purchase price range. So you'll see we have two scenarios kind of built out here today, um, where um, if we look at it just as, using our employment income, what do we buy for this purchase price, or what can we afford, and if we add the rental income, what can we afford in that world as well. And let's take a look at this. So what I have here is sort of some numbers that we had for somebody that we put together. Their household income was about 109,000. Nothing outrageous, definitely doable. We were looking at putting about $30,000 down. They are first-time home buyers. It's in Ontario. Based on everything we looked at, and we said, okay, you're comfortable with a $550,000 purchase price. So when we look at our numbers, we look at the total down payment needed. We throw in some legal fees in there, right? Because you have to account for your closing costs as well. And closing costs encompass, an appraisal, legal fees. We'll see we have land transfer tax here. There is a rebate already applied. Title insurance, tax on the mortgage insurance, and we always throw in an extra $1,000 just so that there are no surprises when we get to the lawyers. Sometimes you have to prepay or repay, I should say, the previous owner for property taxes, right? If you're moving mid-year and maybe the previous owner paid for the next quarter's installment on property taxes, you have to pay them back. So we add in that extra $1,000 when we're kind of estimating our budget. That way there are less surprises. If you don't end up utilizing that, perfect. You have an extra $1,000 in your pocket that you can now do whatever you want with. You can use it to furnish your house. But when we look at total closing costs and down payment, you've got to have about $38,936 all in down payment and closing costs to get to the finish line, okay? So when we look at this in terms of a household budget breakdown, we look at about $2,500 a month in your monthly mortgage payment, and then we throw in, monthly property taxes. So whether you're paying this each month on top of your mortgage payments, or whether or not you are including this just, as a savings measure. Maybe you're paying quarterly and you're saying, hey, I'm putting $250 away each month into this separate checking account, savings account, and that way whenever our tax bill comes due, we can pay it. Regardless, you have to account for about $27.95 each month for your bills. And this doesn't include, right, your utilities and that kind of stuff. And for many folks, okay, they've come to terms with that. They're okay with that. But when we start looking at including some of this rental income, we want to see how this is going to change everything. So let me make a quick edit here. And we're going to keep everything pretty much the same, minus two small changes. One, we're changing our property tax amount. We're going to increase that slightly. And we're going to actually increase our purchase price, okay, up to $600K. We did increase our rates slightly just to insulate them in the event that this type of property is going to need something. It's going to require a slightly higher rate. It's always good to run with conservative rates. That way, if you get something better, you're happy. But for the most part, we kept things the same in terms of closing costs. So property, land transfer tax went up a little bit, and that's based on the purchase price. Total closing costs increased, right? Now, when we look at our total home expenses, our monthly mortgage payment went up to about $29.08, right? We have a higher purchase price, higher mortgage amount, and a higher interest rate in this instance, and higher property taxes. But what we've done is we picked a place that would actually allow for you to generate about $1,500 a month in rental income. So we take your full monthly cost, which together here we were looking at about $31.75, right? So that's what, about $400 ish extra a month to purchase this property. But now we've taken that rental income and applied that to everything, and that gives us $1,120 in savings each month, which means you're really only spending $1,675 a month in housing costs, right? So this actually decreased your monthly cost by about $1,100, which is huge. This means you have an extra $1,100 to put towards renovations, repairs, savings. This kind of rainy day fund. It can do a lot for somebody. Now, nothing is ever good or bad completely. There are always two sides to every coin. And the one thing that we have to look at is some of the pros and cons to this, right? So I mentioned that you have an extra $1,120 each month. Now you have to also prepare yourself for the rainy days, meaning with tenants come some difficulties in terms of you have to be willing in many cases to screen your tenants properly, right? You have to interview them, you have to plan for them, you have to understand that you're going to have to make some repairs because your property is used by somebody else. So this extra $1,120, it can always be put towards this kind of rainy day fund where you're saving the money for the months that maybe there are no tenants there, right? You're saving it for the months that you have to repair some things. And maybe we're overestimating rent. Maybe the rent market takes a bit of a shift and we have to then say, okay, well, we used to be able to charge $1,500 a month for this type of property, and we can only charge $1,420 now, whatever it is. This still allows for you to build yourself that buffer for those just in case moments, right? So this does pose a really good strategy for dual income couples, right? In this instance, we have a dual income couple. They have a good job. You have two people who have the ability to earn, who have the ability to kind of grow in the corporate ladder, and potentially you may hit a point where you don't want to deal with tenants anymore, and you can then take that extra savings that you've been having and you've been applying it to the mortgage, and maybe it becomes a monthly payment that is palatable to you guys down the line. Professionals early in your career, potentially you might be somebody who works in an industry that has you traveling a lot, right? Maybe you're away, you're flying in, flying out, or you're traveling for work, for business meetings. This kind of gives you a little extra security. And what I mean by that is having somebody live in your property means you have sort of this built-in security guard with you, right? Somebody who is there to make sure nobody breaks in. Somebody's kind of watching your property at all times. And then if you go to potentially upsize, meaning you've lived in your home for a couple of years, you're looking at moving up the property ladder. Maybe you now are selling to an investor who is looking to do either the same thing, or they want to then rent out to the upper and the bottom units, or however your house is built. The fact of the matter is it gives you flexibility long term. It alleviates that monthly debt obligation, and it increases your cash flow on a monthly basis, and it might be the difference maker that says, hey, you have to wait and save up an extra another $50,000 to get that house, or you might be able to pull the trigger sooner than you thought and get yourself into the house that you wanted to, right? So if you're considering buying and want to run some numbers, see how the rental income would affect your qualification, I'd be more than happy to run these for you, and we can see how it's going to be, how it's going to shake out, I should say, because, like I said, this could be the difference in many cases that puts you to the next level. All right? Chat soon.